In the previous videos, we created a cluster, we installed a role in the cluster, we also saw how to encrypt disks. But now, continuing on the security page, let's also check out cluster-aware updating. This was a new feature in Windows Server 2012 and is still here in Windows Server 2012 R2. This feature helps you perform patches on your clusters without too much stress on your part because most of the process will be automated. For example, moving resources from one node to the other, moving resources back after the node has been updated, and things like this. The way it works is that it goes node by node and updates each node of the cluster. And before that, it puts it in maintenance mode and, of course, moves everything to the other nodes of the cluster. When that node is done, it will go back to normal and the process will take care of another node, moving the roles from that node to the other nodes, updating it, and so on. Cluster-aware updating has two operation modes. The first one is called self-updating mode, and in this mode you just install the cluster-aware updating as a role in the cluster, and the cluster then takes care of updating itself. The second one is remote updating mode, in which you from a different server or computer that is not part of the cluster will start the update process via PowerShell or with the cluster-aware updating GUI. As far as where do you get your updates for, there are two update sources that are accessed via plugins. The first one is the Windows Update plugin, which can connect to WSUS or to Windows Update. The second one is the hotfix plugin, and this plugin connects to an SMB share where you can put third-party updates like BIOS or drivers and so on, or Microsoft updates that are limited distribution releases, and you have to download them yourself from their site. They are not included maybe in WSUS. Before we begin and see how cluster-aware updating works, just a couple of notes. Make sure that if you use cluster-aware updating on your clusters, that there are no other systems which control automatic updating on that cluster, like for example WSUS or System Center Configuration Manager. Also, if cluster-aware updating takes the updates from WSUS, for example, or from Windows Update, please make sure that you don't configure automatic updating. So, continuing from the first note, it's very important that the updating technologies don't overlap, because then you might have problems or unexpected downtimes. If you use cluster-aware updating, just use cluster-aware updating and nothing else. One cool thing is that when you want to update your cluster, you can use both plugins at the same time, so in the same sequence. And if you want to read more about cluster-aware updating, I have the link in this presentation, which you can get from GitHub, because there really is a lot to read if you want to go thoroughly through everything you can do with cluster-aware updating. But let's go ahead and start configuring cluster-aware updating so we can get a better picture of how it works. In this video, we are going to configure cluster-aware updating to use the two plugins that are available. So we are going to take updates from WSUS, but also from a file share. So first I want to take care of configuring the share for the hotfixes, and for that I will use one of my file servers that I have, and I will connect to it now through PowerShell remoting. And on this server, I will start to configure the folder structure and the share. First, let's configure the primary folder. So I'll name it cow. Then let's create the share, and it will be a normal share, path, name, and this is important. Cluster aware updating needs the share to have either SMB signing or SMB encryption enabled. I will enable SMB encryption on this file share. This is also done, and I will make two subfolders in the primary share. The first one, in this one we will put every update that should apply to all of our cluster nodes. So if you have a cluster with 10 nodes, everything that is in this folder will install on all the nodes. The second one is, if you see here, the folder name is corresponding to the name of one of my cluster nodes. All updates that I will place in this folder will only be installed on this cluster node and not the others. So this is a good way to either test updates or make sure that you don't try to install one update twice on the other nodes, etc. But yeah, this was it for creating the share and the folder structure. Now we have one more thing to do. In the root folder of the share, we also have to copy an XML file, and this can be found in this path on any server that has cluster aware updating RSAT tools installed. And in my case, I have the RSAT tools installed on this domain controller. So it worked. And now we also have to populate, of course, the folders. In my case, I will only populate the folder for FS01B with an update, but you can try also to put files, update files in cow hotfix all. I also left you a link with a test update if you want to test for yourself. Let's place the update. Let's get the update that we want and go to the folder. And the folder is this one. Now we have an update in this folder. Okay. The next thing we have to do is also let the cluster nodes know what update server they need to contact in case you want to use also the Windows Update plugin. And of course, I will point them to my WSUS server. And for this, you only need to configure the one setting that points a specific server to your WSUS. You don't need to do anything else. So let's see how we can configure it. In this OU, I have my two clustered nodes. So I will create my group policy here. We have to go to Windows Update, and here you only need to configure this. And of course place whatever server you have in your environment as the WSUS server. You can also configure client targeting, for example, if you want only specific updates to be installed, but do not configure automatic updating, please. So we are done with the group policy. The only thing that we have to do before continuing is also, of course, to apply it on our two cluster servers. So we are going to run gp update force on the two cluster nodes, which will not take very long. It's done. So now we have the file share ready. We have also a WSAS ready. We can go ahead and start working with cluster aware updating. Now on my domain controller here, I have already the RSAT tools for cluster aware updating, for clustering actually. So I don't have to run the first command. And when you install this, you also get this cool PowerShell module that has a couple of commandlets to let you use cluster aware updating. And I think you guessed it, in this video we are going to be using a coordinator node to run cluster aware updating. And as you see here, there is a firewall rule that we need to enable on the nodes. This is so that they can be remotely restarted by cluster aware updating. And we can just modify the invoke command that we did previously and enable the rule on both the nodes. And with that done, we can start actually using cluster aware updating. The first thing you should do, in my opinion, is to test that everything will work correctly using this command. And it will start a couple of tests. Some of them will fail and that's okay. But if you get a success through, it means that the important things did pass and you are ready to continue. The next command I recommend you use at least the first time is invoke cow scan. This will only scan for updates and will not install them. And at least in my environment, this is very useful because the first 3 or 4 times it will fail because of a WSAS problem where the packets sent from the server to the client will be too big for only one trip to the WSAS server. So I will have to run the invoke cow scan a couple of times to find also updates in WSAS. If I would have run this directly, the cow run, it would of course have failed. So let's use invoke cow scan now. And before, let me explain what we are doing. We are going to run this on the FSO1 cluster. We are going to use both Windows Update and hotfix plugins. As far as parameters go, for the Windows Update plugin, I'm going to put these two parameters, is installed equals 0 and is hidden equals 0. So this is a filter of what updates to find. And for the hotfix plugin, of course, I will give it the path to the share, and also this, which you should not use in a production environment. So this will check if your ACL on the cow folder is correct. It doesn't contain, for example, users and other security groups that it shouldn't. Since we did not modify the security for the folder, it's not really the most secure, and I will not secure it in this video. So I will use this parameter. But if you are going to use this in production, please secure the folder. And you will find out how if you go to the article that I put in the presentation, which of course you can find in my GitHub page. So I talked too much. Let's run the command. And let's make this screen a little bigger so we see what's happening. And as you can see, as far as the hotfix plugin goes, FSO1B found the update. And as you can see, the first run failed. And this is the usual error that you will see. And this means that you have to try running the update scan for a couple of times for it to actually get to the WSUS server, but the hotfix part worked and it found our update for FSO1B. So now I have to run, I think, invoke cow scan 2 or 3 times more for it to also find the updates in WSUS. I will jump on when it will actually be successful and we have the results. And after 2 more tries, it also worked for the WSUS part. So as you can see, using the 2 plugins, FSO1B found an update in the share that we made and also an update in WSUS, and FSO1A has only one update in WSUS. And with this done, we are ready to continue and actually run the update itself. So with invoke cow run, you will do the scanning and also the updating itself. And the parameters are more or less the same. Cluster name, the plugins that you want to use, plugin arguments are the same that we used in the scan. Also this, which again I would recommend you not use it in production and secure your share better. And -force, so we don't get asked if we are sure. Let's run the command. And now it will do at first the same thing. It will try to find all the updates, but then it will start to install the updates node by node. And first I see that it's starting to work on FSO1A. And already on FSO1A it installed the update from WSUS and it will restart the server. Now at this point you would think that the restart will be taking too much time, but don't worry. The way the update works is that at the restart phase it waits in the restarting part a little more, so it gives the server time. Even though your server may be running already, this will still wait to account for a lot of the scenarios in the wild, let's say. So just have patience, because after this part it will do a scan again to make sure it doesn't have any other updates. If it doesn't find anything other than what it installed already, it will move to the B node, and in our case then it will be done. So I will come back to you after the whole process is done. And this is the screen you should get when everything is done, and when you see succeeded for all nodes, then you can breathe freely because you are done, everything worked correctly and your nodes are back online. And let's check quickly in the failover cluster manager. So everything is the same as it was before the updates. The nodes are both up. The storage is okay, so everything looks great. And of course I used only PowerShell for this clusterware updating video, but you also have the possibility to use a GUI interface if you want. So in this interface you just have to connect to your cluster, connect, and you will see also the history of what we did, that the last update was successful. You can start a new updating session and so on. This was a quick look at clusterware updating. I hope this video was useful. Please leave a like if it was, also consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.